legality.
Morality is
in
so
the court
subjective.
system.
It's
Well, more
so
so
damn
I'm thinking
subjective.
about crime and
I don't think
consequence,
murder is
right?
subjective.
Well,
I
that,
think that's
I mean-
pretty
Well, we have a different opinion on if it's murder.
Okay,
though,
so
as well.
why when a pregnant woman gets shot or killed, why is it a double homicide?
Because it wasn't her choice.
That
Like,
literally
if she
makes
was-
no
If
sense.
she was trying
Right?
to carry the
That
child,
literally makes no
well, if
sense.
she wanted to carry that child to a human being,
wait,
then yes, it is
what?
double homicide.
That's a good question.
Is that
It's still
Oh,
but it's
because
still
it
like a
wasn't her
child.
choice?
If she wanted to bear the child,
So what? So what?
To
So
a
like,
human.
If I think in my head about killing somebody, am I murdering them?
no.
Okay, no, right? So if it's not a life by your standard, how could it be murder? Regardless
she
of
was
the
wanting
intent?
to carry
hang on. Regardless of the intention of the mom, how in the world could it be murder just based on her intention? That's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. Can you explain that to me, please? Like, use really small words.
If she was trying to carry that child to birth,
Yeah.
and that option was taken from her because she was murdered, and therefore it killed the baby, then that's a double
That's not a
homicide.
baby,
sure.
though, by your standard, right?
I guess it depends when she was, but again, it's a senseless murder, and if she wanted to carry it to full term, then it would have
But
been a
that's
child.
not a baby by your standards. Is that correct?
At what point? Like 6 weeks, like 4 weeks?
Whatever the point is where you think it's not a
If
baby.
she hadn't decided to have an abortion and she wanted to
Why
carry
does
that
her, what her
child,
decision doesn't matter here?
we just have different opinions because I'm
No, there's no
pro-choice.
difference of opinion. We're just doing a logical consistency check.
What's the cutoff for you? When are you saying?
woman, right? Whether or not it is the case that she wants to have the abortion or not have the abortion, from your view, is that a baby or not a baby? Do we have like the Jeopardy theme song? I don't.
I just don't know how to answer your question, so.
Well, at what term do you
wait,
think
wait,
an
hang on,
abortion?
Hang on.
Even
What do you
if,
mean you don't know how to answer the question? Is the thing inside the woman's belly a baby or not?
so
Yes,
even
it
if
is.
she were murdered before what I consider to be a life of a child, which is, I think legally it's like 6 weeks, you can have an abortion if it's
Yeah.
up to 6 weeks. So even if she were murdered at the 3-week mark, the 4-week mark, if her plan was to carry that child and bear that child, then I do think, yes, that's the reason it's double
That
homicide.
doesn't make any sense. Is that child, from your view, an actual baby or not?
No, not before 6 weeks.
Then why would it be murder?
Because the senseless action, if that didn't
Yeah,
happen,
she
it would.
got murdered.
Yes,
She
but if
got
that didn't
murdered.
happen, she would have had a baby.
Yeah, okay, so you're making a case against abortion. If she hadn't had an abortion, she also would have had a baby, right? So she's a murderer by your logic.
Okay. Like I
That's
don't
your
know how to-
logic. Like that. So here's your logic. If it is the case that the woman intended to have the baby, she would have had the baby.
Should I have the opinion
Right?
that it shouldn't
But
be a
if
double?
It is the case that, hang on, but if it is the case that the woman aborts the child before it comes to term, then that's murder.
So-
And we know it's murder because if she's murdered with the baby in her womb, even if it's before when you consider it to be a baby, you consider that murder because the baby's not brought all the way to term. So no matter what, from your view, abortion would be murder.
So you think my stance should be that it shouldn't be considered a double homicide? That would be me aligning with my own stance.
Yeah, that would be at least the consistent stance.
Sure, that would be the consistent stance, but I just think there's more nuance to it. I think if it,
What's the nuance? Like, how do you intend something to be alive or not? It either is alive and it is the thing, or it's not. You don't
Yeah,
like.
I think we just-
can't could I be like, you killed the chair, because my intention is that the chair is alive. That's just that's not factual though, right? The chair isn't actually alive, so you can't murder the chair. From your view, this is not a baby, so how could the guy be charged for 2 homicides? That makes no sense.
I'll fix my stance and say that if it's after 6 weeks, then it should be a double homicide charge. If that makes you feel better about
Should
me
women
having
be
a
able to have
consistent.
abortions after 6 weeks?
You're asking if we should be able to have abortions past 6 weeks? No. So now I'm changing my stance from the double homicide that if it's prior to 6 weeks, If you want my
Right.
argument
so women should not be allowed to have abortions past 6 weeks.
That's a heavy debate. So
Well, no, it's just an internal. In this case, it's just consistency.
well, it's heavily debated. At what point, because a lot of women don't know until the 6-week mark, and then they don't have the time to make a choice. But I mean, I'm not a biologist.
When you do like a meta thing, when you give commentary about the status of something, it's kind of actually irrelevant to the question. So like if I go, how is the weather outside? And you go, well, that's heavily debated. It's like I'm not.
Well, I'm letting you know that I don't have a specific opinion.
Hang on, I'm not asking you what Jim, Paul, and Chuck think. I'm asking you what you think, right? So, is it murder after 6 weeks, or isn't it?
I don't necessarily have an opinion on that. I think there's discrepancies. Yeah, Brian didn't give his opinion on if he was pro-choice or pro-life. He said both sides had, or pro-life had, a lot of information that he agreed with as well. So, I mean, you can hold double.
Yeah, I understand that's Brian's position.
Okay, in my position.
But when you make a stance that you say something is murder, then you're giving us a value for life. So if that's the case, then you must think that there's value, that this is an actual life past 6 weeks at least, right?
Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, if that's the case, then you would at least have to admit that if a woman has an abortion after the 6-week mark, she is actually killing a baby.
Yes, I think there's scientific backing that life begins at around 6 weeks because of neurons or nerve endings or something like that. I'm not well versed.
Consciousness or something like that.
Yeah,
I get it.
I'm just not well versed on this topic. I just listen to the scientists and think if that's the cutoff that they think is allowable and not extremely immoral, then so be it.
Well, scientists don't determine morality.
Yeah, I mean, it's just all opinions at the end of the day, but legally, it's the 6-week mark.
Yeah, so all scientific consensus is that life begins at conception. That's not refutable. That's a human life at conception. I promise. I'll tell you what. I'll make a deal with you right now. I bet you $100. If you look up right now scientific consensus of when human life begins, it will say at conception. I'll bet you right now if you think I'm wrong.
I believe you. I was just under the impression that was a religious sentiment.
No, that's the scientific consensus, is that it would have to be, right? That's when there's basically new DNA. That it would have to be categorized as human life. So that's when scientists, via consensus, think human life begins. Just saying.
So does that change your stance?
Not necessarily, because again, they have the 6-week benchmark for some reason. I think it's when the child at that point has more autonomy and ability than previously before, that makes it more lifelike. I don't know the science behind this. I'm not the one to argue this point.
Well, these are not scientific claims. Like the moral implications of abortion, those aren't questions that science can answer. They could maybe give us an idea of when consciousness begins or when life begins or things like that, but science isn't in the business of giving us any type of ought claims. They're just only interested in descriptors, really.
But no, that
this is how a thing works, right? Like science could tell us how a nuclear bomb works, but couldn't tell us when we're supposed to use one.